philosophy project that I'm uncertain about, and David, I know. This is it's kind of a philosophy project, but it was motivated by alignment because, like, as you may have heard, we have this problem about aligning to what, right? Like, Stuart Russell, for a few years now at Chai, has like highlighted in his keynote thing, like, here's a fundamental unsolved problem, value plasticity. People's values change through time, and yet we want to be the oh, I don't know you, I'm sorry.
I'm Dylan.
Dylan.
I'm volunteer.
Volunteer, but okay,
here.
so you're forced to be here. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what it means
Well,
to be
I do some agent foundations stuff.
I know. So yeah, this is aimed at the question of, like, given that our values change all the time, what would you want something to align to, right? We're so, like, maybe this is just projection, but I find my own values very confusing. I don't know what I value at any given time. I constantly struggle with what I think of as the Mary Poppins dilemma between, like, trying to go to interesting conferences and do things for your career and spend time with your family. I don't know how to trade those off. So that's one version of value uncertainty, is like what I think of as synchronic, same time value uncertainty, right? I'm faced with a decision right now between this value and that value. Oh good, Oliver, hi. I'm faced with a decision between this value and that value. Oh good, I'm glad Richard can make it. I started by addressing everyone because it was a small crowd. I know it's going to make it. So synchronic version of value uncertainty is, I don't know how to trade off values like family and career. I find that puzzling, I find that hard. There's a similar problem in the other dimension, the diachronic dimension, where, like, I might be able to predictably know that my value is going to change this way and that. So, like, in the philosophy literature, the, like, synchronic issue is sometimes called incommensurability, right? It seems like values are incommensurable. You can't just straightforwardly score them and then compare to see which one's bigger. It's not even clear if there's a straightforward ordering of some kind. Values seem incommensurable in the sense that you can't put them in an ordering. And then there's this problem in the diachronic dimension of, like, I don't know how to defer, when to defer to future value change, right? My values might predictably change in the future. What happened? Oh, dolphins, how lovely. I think I have a hot corner solution to that. I think will work. We'll get to this. This is the only math of the talk. And it's not even math, it's relative to this crowd. It's good for philosophy, right? So yeah, so these are two in the philosophy literature. The synchronic dimension tends to be go under the, if you want, like, prompts or Google searches, it goes under value incommensurability. In this dimension, in the time dimension, Stuart Russell, I mentioned, calls it value plasticity, but it also goes under adaptive preferences, or more recently in philosophy, transformative experiences, right? So, like, I might predict that once I have kids, I'm going to really be into being a parent and having kids, but ahead of time, this was a genuine position. I was, like, genuinely uncertain beforehand about whether I wanted to have kids, especially given that, like, there were all these studies that happiness goes down and stays down until the kids leave home. And yet everyone who writes those studies are like, but I'm so glad I had my kids. Like, this is a weird, I didn't know what to make of that. So a lot of people treat both of those problems as what you roughly might call metaphysical. That is, like, values just aren't the kind of thing that can be determined, that can be commensurated that way. But they're just not the kind of thing that you can settle across this dimension. I want to at least float the idea that we should treat that question as an epistemological one. That is, there is an answer to these hard questions, and it's just that there's a good reason that we might be ignorant of what those answers are. And so the rough proposal here is that we might have what Richard Pettigrew in his book Choosing for Changing Selves have a one true utility. So he considers and rejects this version of how to, he's interested in the diachronic case, and he considers and rejects this solution. I think it's worth more exploring, that we might have a one true utility function, and that it's a complicated utility function. It's so complicated that, I mean, I think of it, I don't know if this is quite the right, in a computer science room especially, like, I don't know if this is quite the right analogy, but I think of it as sort of like a hash function, where, like, the moment you're in the state, you get the answer right away. But it's hard to do inference ahead of time about what other nearby states, what kind of responses those will give. So it's a highly complicated, like, I'm constantly trying, so this I think I can skip to the picture, is that right? Let me look at, I haven't done this paper for a bit. And I welcome clarificatory questions. If in philosophy that's a fuzzy boundary, but closer to the, like, what variable is that than the, like, what is good version of clarificatory questions. I welcome those. Any so far? Okay. So, and I should say, like, this is a realist proposal, so some of you might be from backgrounds like econ, where, like, to talk about reconstructing utilities from you construct it out of, like, behavior and preferences. this is coming from the standpoint that no, there's actually something in my head that drives that preference. It's in that direction instead of it. Yeah.
Are you taking any sense of what like these states are made of?
No, I don't think so. This is very. There's so much that's naive here. Yeah. So I guess now's the time. So just to walk through the model a bit, there's the way the environment is, and I observe over that. These arrows are just like information channels or something. You have to. There's a lot of observations. Those get fed into my world model, which is like a joint distribution over like the next state, the current state. Really, it should be state histories or something. What is that?
Observation?
Yes, that's an O. Observation. I did hit. And actions. And then so I get from my world model a utility response. It's actually, so I'm considering a big set of possible utility functions that might be my one true utility. I have uncertainty about my own utility function, right? And so you can do a sort of toy model of this. Is I have a distribution over this Q is trying to estimate what's my real utility function. The answer is 17. It's utility number 17, but like I don't know that. I'm trying to guess all the time. So like when I enter a state or a perception of a state, which is different, I get this utility out. And then, that gives me some information about what my overall utility, my complicated overall utility function looks like. And I'm constantly trying to infer that. Oh, I really like ice cream. Oh, it turns out I don't like ice cream with pickles. Okay, but I do like it. There's a lot of complicated states that you have to put together to figure out when is it. Oh, I like it when I have beer in this kind of environment with this pizza, but not in this slightly different case. That turns out to have a different reward. And you're trying to generalize across all these possible variables, right? Which obviously is a complicated question. And then that utility function estimate is what feeds into your act evaluation, and then that, of course, influences the world. But there's, how your world model is might also affect this, and how your world model is. I can't remember why. I had good examples at one time of all those arrows. Maybe you find it plausible. What's nice about this? Why do I like this? One thing I like about this is that you can get out then, if you treat this kind of thing as a matter of ignorance, you can get something like principled answers to exploration-exploitation questions, right? Like sometimes I want to know, so I'm caught, like family or career, and of course there's like a cost to like trying to figure that out that I have to trade off, right? At some point I just have to cut off the deliberation and be like, I gotta act, I'm either going to this conference or I'm not. Right, and that can be explained in terms of background confidence in how well I know the utility function in the relevant area. Right, if there's a lot of entropy in the relevant area, I'm more likely to explore. But if I get enough information, I'll start exploiting. I'm pretty confident that this is where I want to go. Yeah.
So I know you didn't want clarifying questions like what is good.
Yes.
But can you give me what is true?
Oh, that's so much easier, Richard.
When you say one true utility function, can I just have like a small pointer?
Yeah, I mean, yes.
The one true utility function.
So I guess now
the difference between this and a epsilon different utility function.
What's the difference between an epsilon different is that in some states there'll actually be a different reward answer, assuming it's a different function.
But like one of them's more true than the other.
I think I don't know if you would agree with this, but the kind of answer he's looking for is the true utility function is the actual generator of that pang of, oh, I didn't like that in the human body.
Yeah. I mean, this is the time of the talk where I confess that I don't really know what this is. It's like a proposal. Is it falsifiable or empirical? I honestly don't know that. Sometimes it feels like a transcendental truth. Like even if it's not true, we have to treat ourselves as though it were true. That we're figuring something out about what we truly value deep down. I honestly am legitimately confused about it. But let me show you why. Let me show you why it has these other.
Yeah, maybe just ask a follow-up question on that. Like, do you generally think of this as like the one true utility that we all have, or is it?
No.
Okay, so it's like.
I'm glad you asked. That's going to come
a
up.
single person, and like I don't know, maybe your biology or something.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. An alien might have a very different utility. For that matter, you and I might have very different utility functions.
Can it change over time?
We'll talk about it. So actually, no, this might be the part where I say let's stick to the clear. I mean, these are all good questions, but you can see how in a room like this we can get derailed fast, and that's why I asked it. So you get the general sort of picture, and then one advantage is you get these sort of principle explore exploit trade-offs because it's just ignorance. You know what to do with like levels of confidence, and there's nice pictures of entropy in the background steering how much you should explore and how much you should exploit, right? Now, how can you get more information about, how can you improve your estimate? Well, I think there are roughly two ways. One is to explore more of the utility space to get a better sense, but another is just to like cogitate more, right? To reflect past, like sometimes you're like, the only way to find, like Elijah Milgram has this example of, there's one roommate who seems really interesting to talk to, but is a slob potential roommate, another potential roommate who's really neat, but like not so interesting to talk to. And like maybe the only way to trade those off is to like have one of those roommates and then learn something about your utility. You know, and it turns out I think I would have rather just had the messy room or whatever, right? But another way is to just think harder, like, oh, you know, I have to trade off, like, I really want to have that cookie, but I also want to make sure I'm healthy enough in the future to enjoy time with my kids. Oh, I should really remember that last time when I had this cookie and I didn't feel so good about it, and this situation seems relevantly like that. Like, that's just further reflection, right? I've already explored, but I'm reflecting more. That, of course, also has a cost. So, and the feeling of that is like, you want time to explore in either of those directions when you're faced with a difficult choice, a value choice. So there are other people who've made proposals like this. There's only one other person I know of who treats the value incommensurability as a matter of ignorance. His name's Don Regan, but and this goes to Micah's question, he treats the ignorance as like of the good with a capital T, capital G. And I think it's because, Gerard's the other academic philosopher I know of in the room. I mean, Richard has some philosophy. Everyone's got some philosophy training. But I think this is a common mistake in philosophy that is subtle, which is like, you want the answer to be, Don Regan wants the answer to be objective. And some people hear that as objective meaning applies to all things at all times, right? And what you want to say is, what I want to say about this utility function is that there's two senses of subjective and two senses of objective. One is like, this is subject relative, meaning there's an objective fact about what your utility function is. There's a separate objective fact about what your utility function is. It's subjective in that sense, objective in the other sense, right? Clear on that? Okay, everyone's nodding with that, so, I mean, that I saw.
Everyone was nodding.
What's that?
Everyone was nodding.
Yeah, right. Of the people I saw, well, anyway, I'm not sure that's right. So, yes, if there were more philosophers here, I'd do some more philosophy, but I don't think it's worth it. Now, I mean, basically, I do want to say this. If you don't treat it as a matter of ignorance, I think that's a deeply skeptical position. Yeah, Cecilia.
You said there were two different ways of objective and subjective, and then you said one.
Oh, I'm sorry. So there's subjective meaning, I mean, these are both hard to define, but one, subjective meaning, like, depends on the person.
Yeah.
And then there's subjective meaning, it's not true in a mind-independent way.
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, so it's true whether or not, here's one way to think of it. Micah might think that more donuts is good for him. And he might be wrong about that. So his mind can be wrong about this. In that sense, it's an objective fact about which Micah could be wrong. He thinks the donut is what's going to best serve his utility, and he's wrong about that. So you see how it's subjective in that sense? But me, in otherwise the same circumstance, it might be right for my utility. I have a different utility function for him. If you ask whose utility, you have to ask whose utility function.
Sure, sorry. The subjective and like, subjective means we all have different utility functions. But
Yes, in this case.
Okay, but there's some other meanings.
But it's an objective fact. It's not, so sometimes subjective means if you believe it, it's true, roughly speaking.
Sorry, I think I get what you're saying. Yeah.
And that's not the kind of subjectivity that's at issue here. Micah can be wrong about what's good for him.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great. I'm glad you stopped me. Because yeah, that's as I say, I think it's a subtle mistake that philosophers make sometimes. And I'll just say, I was going to say that like, if you don't treat it as ignorance, that's a deeply skeptical position. What it means is those decisions you make that feel so important. When I'm trying to decide like how to weigh family against career, it feels weighty. It feels important. And if you don't treat this as like there's an answer and I don't know what it is, which is my position, you're instead saying there's not an answer, which means it's arbitrary. There's no reason to go this way versus that way. And if there's no reason to go this way or that way, why does it feel so heavy? I think I can capture that phenomenology, right? That we treat them as though there's an answer here. We can't help it. Michael looks up. Maybe this is disabled. Mike, as some of you may know, is working on a similar project, so I commandeered him. I appreciate you coming. And by the way, this is not, Micah gave me great comments on a draft that I have not updated since. I haven't thought about this for a while, sadly, but yeah, so that was, I think, the main thing I wanted to say, is that it's skeptical to take the ignorance position. Right, that then it's just a matter, like Elijah Milgram thinks we construct our values as we go along. Oh, it turns out what I really like is talking to, but like if we construct them, there wasn't a fact antecedently, and you couldn't have gone wrong. You couldn't have made a mistake. And if you can't make a mistake in that realm, why does it feel so weighty? Right? So, oh yeah, I told Gerard, well, maybe we'll talk later about imprecise credences. Roughly speaking, Sarah Moss has this paper where she's like, your theory of like, so some people want to have imprecision in probabilities, naturally enough. Treat them as intervals or something like that. And Sarah Moss has a great paper where like, hey, we already think there are value dilemmas. I would think of it as like imprecise utilities, like you can take a set of utilities, right, instead of a set of probabilities. And she's like, oh, if we already think there are value dilemmas, and in these value dilemmas you're provably subject to certain kinds of analogs of Dutch books, then maybe we should be okay with creedal dilemmas where we're similarly susceptible to certain kinds of Dutch books. Yeah.
So the argument against subjectivism is, in some sense, an argument against infinitely many utility functions being like correct, right? So like whatever utility function you think you have, you're right. But then you're arguing for, maybe another way of phrasing my previous question is like there's a long way between one utility function being the true utility function and infinitely many being the true utility function. Why do we get to one?
It's a fact about how you
1,000 true utility functions.
Only one is responsible for, I mean, if they, so if they're different functions, they'll give you different answers in different states, I guess is what I'm taking for granted.
Yes.
And like, if you were to enter that state, one of those will give the value. That's the true utility function? I'm not sure if...
Let me try and rephrase Rich's question.
Yeah.
Saying the argument you just made is it feels weighty because there's a real narrowing down that you have to do. There's some things that are wrong.
Yeah.
But even if there are 6 things that are right, it would still be the case that most things are wrong and it would feel weighty.
Yeah, but then couldn't it feel like you could have a hard time deciding between those? I mean, sorry, maybe this is confusing. Like, when I don't know if this is where it feels like a confusion, but maybe I'm just misunderstanding, but like, when I'm weighing family versus career, I'm consulting my U-hat, right? I'm consulting my estimator. And that might treat a lot of, like, according to the, on my distribution on all these utility functions, a lot of them might give the same answer or something like that. But in fact, if I would enter these circumstances versus those, there is something in me, the one true utility function I'm postulating, that then gives me my little reward or not, of whatever value. I don't know if you guys seem to understand each other, and I seem to be not understanding either. I don't want to say stipulate, but like, this model is such that there is one, you consider all the states, you consider, I don't know, all the functions of real numbers or whatever you mathematicians want to construct, and pick one of those, that's your utility function.
I think it's not a complaint about the model, but just about the argument you're using to support why there should be one.
Oh, a felt incommensurability. So there might be a lot of things on par, and yeah, I guess then I think my answer would be, well, okay, it's constrict to that class. Couldn't it still feel like, I mean, maybe so here's another possibility. It might be they all get scored equal, right? Of course, in that case, you're right. But if there's subtle differences and you can constrict to that class, like, I mean, so one possibility is, yes, there are lots of different, like, it might be equally good to take this versus that. Like, Burden's ass is a famous example of, like, this donkey that's like, is it carrots, or I don't know, that's equally distant, and like, there's just no reason, then it really is arbitrary, right? But I think in those cases, I think we're also less likely to feel like driven to find the right answer. Because we're equally happy, we're just like, I think either of those is fine. Yeah, let's see.
Is there an analogy between the question in philosophy of maths about whether you create or discover mathematical propositions? In both cases, there's like something objective there that you'll get to.
Yeah.
But the like, do I create my values as I go along?
Yeah.
It's not, when you're saying it's not, there exists a utility function.
Yeah.
You don't mean there's like something written in your brain.
I do.
Well.
I mean, I think I do, I'm not sure.
Okay, this is very much how I think about it, and the way that I frame it is like, there doesn't have to be something in your brain, but there's something that's like literally like in the neurons, but there exists something in abstract space such that you're like discovering what it is and you're narrowing down what it is in the same way that you do mathematics.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting analogy. We were just talking about that yesterday, philosophy of math, and it's cool. Yeah, my knee-jerk reaction is to say, like, how very economist of you, but like, it sounds like you have constructivist instincts, but I'm sympathetic to that. And as I say, I really don't know. I mean, yes, am I inventing or discovering my utility function? I think is an open question. But I guess, again, I would push that, like, it's somewhat cynical to say inventing, because then these questions that feel weighty are not are actually arbitrary.
I think.
So here I am, like,
I'm
should I? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm very much in the world where, like, I think we discover maths rather than we create it.
Okay.
But then maybe when I like think about, okay, if you have this strong intuition that you create maths, like maybe I'm like projecting too much, but on my generous interpretation, if you come to the same maths way, maybe it's something like about your beliefs about what exists already in abstract space.
Yes. These are good. I think this is a good analogy. Is all I can say, and that I'm confused about the metaphysical nature of this one trees. But let me go on. Oh yeah, so to finish the quick creedal. So Sarah Moss says, hey, however we treat creedal imprecision, given that we already tolerate utility imprecision, this isn't exactly how she puts it, but given that we already tolerate utility imprecision, why not also tolerate credence imprecision? And to me, that's a modus tollens, not a modus ponens, right? In both cases, they leave you open to equivalents of Dutch books, and I think in a rationalist room, particularly like in a room full of one-boxers, I hope I don't have to sell that, like, no, like, don't open yourself up to Dutch booking in either of these realms, right? So I agree with her that they should be treated symmetrically, but I say, yeah, we should be precise about both and treat what feels like no fact of the matter as ignorance. Because then at least, if that's the case, we're less susceptible to Dutch book. Okay, that was the quick. And then there's some, how am I doing on time? You are, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. 2:30, okay. Very one sentence comparisons. I think this captures some intuitions in ethics that have been floating around. One is like Aristotle treats ethics, or at least wisdom, what he called phronesis, like a skill. And I hear skill like as like you have to train it up in a neural net. You can't do it. You have to do it n-phi. You can't do it go-phi. That's what skill means to me. And like this makes sense of like wisdom, of which my wife is abundant, in which my wife has abundant wisdom. I do not. And what I think that means is that like she's really good at this utility estimation. She has a really good sense of like she's navigated. It's like learning to ride a bike, right? She's just done the I don't know how. But she's good at it. And so it makes sense of Aristotle and phronesis. Another thing that's kind of nice, well, specificationism, if you're interested in that, I'll talk about that. Another one you guys might have heard of, because Yudkowsky writes about it, is like ideal observer theories. So some people say, what's right for you is what you're idealized. You can be mistaken about what's good for you because like you don't know there's poison in the glass or whatever, but your ideal observer is the one you should really defer to in terms of what's good for you. The one who knows also all the relevant facts and so on about your circumstances. That's who you should defer to. This is a nice way to capture the ideal observer, right? That like this is what you really care about. And if you knew the whole state space and you knew the whole utility function, then that determines what's good for you. Okay, so now let me tell. We're nearing the end. Let me tell 3 different stories that puzzle me. I mean, one I think I can capture. So here's 3 different stories of value change. One that I thought about for some time is like Ebenezer Scrooge, right? Ebenezer Scrooge, if you know the story of Christmas Carol, you don't know the story of Christmas Carol? Where you shake, I don't mean to call you out, I'm sorry, I didn't. In a nutshell, Ebenezer Scrooge like only cares about money, and then like, and he's a miser, and he won't let his employees off for Christmas and stuff. But then he goes through all these experiences, and he discovers that what he really cares about is conviviality and cheer and like human I don't know, something like that. So that looks like a value change. And not only does it look like a value change, it looks like a value improvement. It looks like he's learned a better value. That's what makes that story compelling, I think, right? Is he's learned a better value. Now, maybe you can guess, I don't know if it's easy to get. Like, on my story, he just got a better estimator because he went through a bunch of experiences that helped him explore his utility space. he has a better estimator. And so there's that sense of value change, which isn't really value change. It's just like better estimates that look like value change. And so similarly, if you tell me a process where I come to value something different in the future, if that process looks like learning to me, then I should defer to those future values now. Then a kind of reflection principle holds, where like those are just better informed version of what my real values are, and I should defer to them. Hey Alex, you're welcome to take a seat. You don't have to. This is all the math. On the other hand, so that's one story, right? Value learning. Where I think what's really going on there is we're getting a better sense of our own complicated utility function. Another possible story is, I tried to make these all literary, so Winston Smith in 1984, like he doesn't like the totalitarian party of his country, but he knows he's about to be brainwashed back into service to the party. And this is a case where he's not learning a better utility function. What we want to say there is someone is intervening on this utility function. They now have a different utility function. And insofar as they think that's what's going on in the future, they have no incentive to defer to that future value set. That's just like not them anymore. So when Winston Smith's asking, I mean in some sense, so when Winston Smith's asking like, should I save for that guy's retirement, we might be like, screw that guy, that's not me. My utility function's been changed. And those are two different ways value change. But what this needs is, and what's hard about this, is you need then to distinguish. There are sloppy, messy, weird cases in between, of course, where like, I mean, the one I think of is like, that Mike and I were, I don't know if you remember, but like, I wasn't, even though everyone tells you if you're going to go to philosophy grad school, you better damn well be sure you want to be a philosopher. That was not true of me. Part of me wanted to be an actor, and I don't know. But I went to philosophy grad school anyway, and as you might predict, by the time I came out of philosophy grad school, I was like, I'm going to be a philosopher. I can't imagine doing anything else. So, like, was I socialized? Did I have my utility function changed? Or did I learn something more about my value space? My hesitant answer on that is that I gained more confidence that I would be in other words, I lowered my background entropy on whether I would enjoy the philosophy life. I didn't really get to explore the acting life as much, but I got more confidence in it, and that was enough on the explore-exploit trade-off to like, okay, I'm going to stick in philosophy, right? I don't know though. I'm conceding there's lots of mess here, but there are clear cases of a third kind of value change. So one kind of value change is really value learning, where this remains fixed. Another kind of value change is where like something else intervenes on this utility function. But a third kind of value change is where I intervene on this utility function, given the opportunity, right? So like,
driven presumably by the utility function estimate, which is not that one.
well, yeah, I'm glad yeah, I guess it's something like that. But even this utility function might prefer this other utility function, so to speak, right? Isn't that the case? Or am I messed up?
Off the hitchhiker thing, right?
Yeah, that's the. I mean, I'm not as familiar with those kind of cases as I should be, but like, so the literary case I could dig up. I've not read this book, but Bella in Twilight is considering like this. If you have a better literary case, I'd like it. Bella in Twilight is deciding whether to become a vampire, right? But like the thought of drinking blood, let's say, again, I haven't read the book, but I'm assuming the thought of drinking blood grosses her out. But like, and right now that stands in the way of her becoming a vampire, which she thinks will mean eternity with her beloved other vampire or whatever. And so like, if she could just get rid of the distaste for drinking blood, you can think of, I mean, I don't have this carefully worked out, but I guess the idea is like there's kind of this local minimum or maximum that's in the way of a better peak or valley over there, right? And if you could just smooth the way a little bit, you'd endorse that new utility function that would make it easier to get over there to those high utility states, right? Yeah.
So that sounds to me like either with this model,
See, Richard, thanks for coming.
She's being driven by this utility function estimate and is like.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, yes,
Or-
you're right. Because after all, she might be very wrong about whether she really wants to spend eternity with the N-word.
Or this
Oops,
is.
I knew that name.
Or this is
That
an
just popped
example
in my head.
of like a reflective process causing an incoherent thing to become more like a utility function in the first place.
I can't think about that on stage right now, but that's cool.
Like she may have wanted some things that are mutually exclusive, and if she had like actually tried to like make pricing for the trade-offs, they wouldn't have.
She'd be unapproachable in some way.
And then and decided to become a vampire and like smoothing away that aversion to blood was like a way to resolve this, which is not unique to me.
No, I can't.
Yeah, don't worry.
I have to think about it. Yeah,
The way that I think about this is I think about you have like levels, and you have some
Yeah.
some like higher level utility function, and then you create for yourself like, I want like a rich, fulfilling life, and I think to do that I need like a good career, and I need to get married, so I have all these instrumental goals, and they themselves might be incoherent. So then when you do this process of reflection, you're like, oh, I thought I wanted this thing in service of some higher goal, and this might just be like ultimate happiness or connectedness or like making an impact or something, or some combination of these things. But it's not that itself is inherent, it's the instrumental goals you create for yourself in order to like, because like re-optimizing everything entirely in order like for this thing is hard, whereas optimizing just for a smaller goal like have a good career is much easier to computation manage.
The way that makes it into, unless you want to.
No, I will say, I'm not sure I followed all that, but like I will say that one way I've been thinking about sort of weakness of will type cases, like a more prosaic case than Bella Swan is like, let's say I'm a smoker, but I wish I didn't have this craving for cigarettes. I might write it out of my utility function if I could. Is something like when I give in to, even though my current utility estimate says I'd be better off not smoking, but I still do it anyway. Like my instinct is to explain that in terms of something like hierarchy. I guess I'll just say that much for now. But you had a follow-up, or?
I was just going to say, the way that makes it into my head is that if you posit that there is like, the policy is being driven by something kind of incoherent, these incoherent values, and is on reflection like going to become this coherent utility function in the end, you can always kind of cast it backwards by saying like, well, we take that thing that we ended with, we can look at these as these incoherent approximations of that which will reflect into it. And yeah, so like that sounds like a reasonable way that you could look at it. But you would never be able to look at a thing that is doing that and efficiently, well, we don't know how to look at that and then efficiently figure out where that is headed, which utility function to cast these things as like incoherent in the way such that they shake out to that.
Yeah.
I mean, I just have a little more. I'm glad this is sparking, and I kind of want to sit in on it if you guys continue talking about it. Well, actually, I'm not really. Actually, oops, wrong glasses. I'm at an age where I need these in order to read my own notes. Yeah. Oh, okay. So the one here's where I was going to say, if it hadn't come up already, that I'm unsure about the nature of this proposal. I'm confused about it. Sometimes I do think it's empirical. I know, part of what sparked me in this direction was Brian Christian's alignment problem book, which taught me a lot. I feel like it shouldn't have, because I feel like I was been there. But one of the things it taught me about was temporal difference learning, and temporal difference learning seems to mean that there's something in your brain that's tracking how good it expected things to be and how good it didn't turn out to be after all. Like if you're tracking a difference, you're tracking how good things are for you. So he's off now. I don't know if you guys know, he's doing dissertation on neuroeconomics, because he thinks this is an empirical approach to the one true utility. That seems open to me, but again, sort of like what Cecilia was saying and others, yeah, maybe this is constructed, or as I was saying, it maybe is a transcendental truth where insofar as we treat ourselves as agents who want to act for reasons, we have to posit a one true utility for ourselves. I don't know. That's part of why I wanted to workshop this. This is part of why I haven't submitted this to any journal. Is because I don't have that. I don't feel like I have anything good to say about that part yet, and I feel like maybe I should before I let a reviewer at it. Yeah, and then finally, maybe you can see, I guess I probably don't have to tell you the implications for AI alignment. We want to align to the right kind of thing. And you want, if you're doing something like the assistance game, where the robot is trying to infer my utility function, it might be good for them. This might be one way to represent my own uncertainty about my values, right? Is that they have to infer through my estimate. They have their estimate of my estimate of the one true utility, right? Or at least that's maybe one way to make better sense of what my values are. Now, in that case, the robot, of course, is doing more like the constructivist type project, but I guess my instinct is adding this layer at least would help it explain away what otherwise might look like errors. I don't know. I'll leave it at that, and now open. I don't know how much time I have, but I'd like to explore more of whatever anyone.
20 minutes.
Oh, great. Okay. Oh, yeah. I think that's all I wanted to say. Oh. Great play. But yeah, Gerard.
Since Daniel Herman's not here, I feel an
You're
obligation
going to represent.
to ask about the measurement scale of the utilities here.
Yes.
Have you thought at all about that?